everyone, and welcome. I'm UTC President and CEO Rusty Williams, and I want to thank you for joining us today on this special edition of the UTC podcast that we call the C-Suite Conversations. In these special episodes, we talk about what's going on in the industry with executive leaders from many of the UTC associate members. We want to find out what's going on with their companies and what's going on around the industry. Recently we've had a lot more involvement between our traditional telecommunications members and the traditional enterprise IT organizations. We've been talking about the convergence of IT and OT for many years, but you know what? Now it's in full swing. And fortunately for UTC and its members, we've had several companies join UTC from that traditional enterprise IT space. And today, to that end, we're glad to have with us on this episode Mr. Michael Lauer of Fortinet. Michael is the Senior Director of the U.S. Public Sector for Fortinet. Mike, that's a lot of words there, but it's great to have you with me here today on this special edition of the UTC podcast.
Thanks so much, Rusty. I appreciate the time and really looking forward to our conversation.
Same here, same here. And generally what I do when I start these conversations, we all have our resumes and bios and that kind of stuff. And rather than me trying to read through your vast history, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Mike Lauer and how'd you end up where you are today?
So Mike Lauer. I live in the great state of Iowa, so I think I'm in technically Region 6 of UTC kind of region there. More than anything else, though, I think probably important about me while I'm a dad and husband, I have three beautiful kids. What I really have always had is a life that has had open doors and has moved me along to where I've gotten here. So I've always been in technology. And I have a degree in philosophy, but I've always worked in technology. And I actually started in, customer service, tech support, and dial-up days. So that was where I started my kind of technology career. And from there, it's moved everything from engineering roles to becoming a chief technology officer for the state of Iowa. And all along that whole way, I'm working in telecom. I'm working in emergency communication networks. I'm working in some of the critical infrastructure outlays that DHS CISA puts in their little 16 category group. And not little, but you get what I'm saying there.
Right.
But I've always worked in some essence around that availability construct of that being a main driver for the companies I've worked for, and that naturally moved into security over time. You start working with layer one, layer two, layer three networks. And as we've gone along, and I'm sure we'll talk more about today, security starts to be a very large concern, and that's opened up into there. And that's how I got to where I'm here.
All right. Well, sweet. I think you have the honor of being the first philosophy major
Yeah.
to be on this
Yeah.
podcast. So that's an interesting mix. I don't know how we all have our journey, right? We
Yeah.
all kind
Yeah.
of follow our path and, we take some interesting side steps or trips along the way, but, it would be interesting to hear about on over a cup of coffee or something at the
Yes.
time. But, I've always said, again, I started on the utility side of this business,
Yeah.
but I was in pure telecom. And, once you get into this business, whether it's layer one, layer two, three, or wherever, it's hard to get out of it, right?
Yes.
It's something about it. If you have the right mentality, whether it's a service mentality or it's that utility, got to keep the lights on mentality or whatever, it just sucks you in and you want to do good things. You want to provide services to the customers, or, in your case, the customer is the utility. If you're on the utility side, the customer is the person paying the bills, whether it's gas, water, electric, or whatever. So, it's hard to get out. We see people bounce around, but it's a great industry. It's been good to me, personally, right? And this opportunity is kind of the cap for that. So let's talk. I know people know the name Fortinet,
Yeah.
but maybe they don't know exactly who, what, where. You pull the information, the public information about Fortinet. I lovingly call it propaganda, but we all have it, right? We all have our marketing
Yes.
information. But I
Yes.
mean, Fortinet's a strong player in this enterprise IT space and beyond now.
Yeah.
I mean, I just pulled a couple of numbers, almost 7 billion in top line revenue, almost 60 billion in market cap, 900,000 customers, 16 million units shipped. That's a lot. And the
Yeah.
company started in what, 2000? So tell me a little bit about Fortinet and what you guys do and how you kind of worked your way over the last 25 years in this marketplace.
Yeah, you've done your homework. I appreciate that, Rusty. So I will spare you from the things that you just said. But no, so typically Fortinet, we started out very heavily with this construct around firewalls, and a lot of people still know us from firewalls. We are the market share leader when it comes to, as you mentioned, those devices that get shipped out there, and that actually gives us a lot of upside for our customer use case. But a lot of people don't actually know and realize is we're an actual leader in what we call the operational technology space, which is what we're talking about the networking side, SCADA networks, distribution networks, things like that. Anything that has, a sensor on it that needs to have connectivity back to it, we make purpose-built products that actually work in that field. So talking about ruggedized gear, we're also talking about software and talking about security, security injection, if you will, and even visibility into those networks that are there. And that's typically not something that you have seen in the past up until, probably the last, 10 years.
Right.
It's not really ever been a concern. So being a leader in that actually helps us become kind of more aligned with what actually matters for utilities. But I do want to go to one point of what you said of, why I think we joined UTC. And if you go and look at UTC's kind of cyber and security issue brief that you all put out there from a policy perspective, it's great, by the way. But there's three priorities that really jump out, I think. And those three that I remember reading were, the integration of physical and cybersecurity, operational flexibility in developing those security strategies, and then cross collaboration between technology partners. Those are exactly challenges that when we are creating our products and our services, we're designing our solutions around that. So it's kind of a hand in glove fit here of why we're a part of UTC. Yeah, and just to give you kind of a touch point, what does that even look like when I'm talking about
Mhm.
solutions being built, right?
Right.
So if we're looking at integrating physical and cybersecurity together, we know utilities face unique challenges. Cyber threats have physical consequences, right? So yeah, substations, you mentioned generation facilities, distribution. We've built what we call the Fortinet security fabric around specifically those type of use cases, but also it has to be flexible. So we go to that operational flexibility side of the world. I live in Iowa, a rural electric co-op in Iowa. It has a completely different need than a major IOU that's going to sit out in California.
Right.
So you have to have a platform that adapts, right? So that's where we've tried to create that kind of convergence conversation of alignment so that infrastructure, it can scale with your infrastructure, but then it can also go ahead and no matter who uses it, gives kind of that offset usability. And I think the last thing I really want to throw on here is because we have a platform that is scalable from, yes, from a layer two perspective, but it goes all the way up into the application layer. And that's how we can, help IT organizations out. And to be clear, we know there's IT in utilities.
Right.
And we can even talk about the threat instances of how that convergence of IT to OT, how that actually happens. But we know that we also have limited staff. So having a platform that gives you awareness, gives you the ability to create automation throughout it is a kind of a perfect fit to address the concerns of cyber threats across the board. And that's really kind of what we're there. So the policy is getting back to that conversation. We really kind of feel like it's a good hand in glove fit to be a part of UTC because we're building products and services and trying to answer the problems of the threats of the day that are very near and dear to our utility partners.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, we've been talking about this convergence, of OT and IT for a long time. But, up until recently, and I don't know, recently, last 2, 3, 4 years, we haven't within UTC, been able to kind of crack that firewall, if you will, to get companies like Fortinet and other, more traditional enterprise IT organizations involved. But I mean, that's the way the industry's going, the way the technology is going. And so that absolutely does make a fit, is a fit for what you guys do, but what the utilities need for within their networks. When I hear and traditionally have heard the name Fortinet, firewalls is what I think of.
Yeah,
Right? That's kind of generally what we think of. But I know you guys do a lot of other stuff in and around that, secure network access kind of arena.
yeah, yeah,
But let me ask you more of a philosophical question. All right, so we've been talking about firewalls, and I lived through the days of the organizational mergers between the traditional telecom organizations and the traditional enterprise IT organizations. That was a culture shock when that happened. I was at Southern Company and it happened like in the mid 90s. So,
Yeah.
it happened a long time ago, but it was a culture shock.
Yeah.
Um, and learning these kind of technologies, was different for, the guys that hadn't been in this part. But when we look at what you guys do, or not just specifically what Fortinet does, but the technology that's in place today across, most organizations, do we ever get to the need where we don't need firewalls or any kind of appliances out there? Or, is this going to become, more ingrained, or is it something different? What do you think about that from
Yeah.
more of a philosophical perspective?
You've asked the philosophy major to be philosophical. Oh no, no. So this is actually one of my favorite things to talk about, Rusty. I think today, and you bring up a really good point. It's a really big talking point in the IT sphere, especially being driven by these concepts of AI models, right? So we have all of these amazing things happening, and they're great, but I think we have to tell a story of really how things happen. And let me frame it this way. I was talking to a CISO. I think it was a major utility CISO. Um, they had invested very heavy in threat analytics, right? So one of the things, whether it's from our platform or other, provider platforms, there's some sort of threat analytics that go out there. Great tools. You want to have it, especially knowing that we have this OT side of the world that is being targeted by nation state actors and very many other cybercrime groups that are out there. Um, but there was a notification of possible breach that happened, right? So this was a basic email phishing campaign that happened. Someone's clicked on it. It actually ended up leading to credential theft, and then the attacker was able to get access and then start to move laterally. I put all that out there because it looked like from what they saw from attribution levels, it was done by a botnet and through an AI type of agent, if you will.
Okay.
But the key point of this is the thing that can stop that behavior are still the basics, and it was proper network segmentation and access control. That is key on this because attackers, whether they are AI or they are human, they follow behaviors. They don't follow buzzwords.
Hmm.
There's an interesting conversation out here for there's a mapping framework out there called the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and they've actually just actually updated this year to include, I think, AI specific attack techniques. But what they're finding here is even within how they lay out kind of this framework of a kill chain, they call it. So it's reconnaissance, initial access, I think persistence, lateral movement, and exfiltration. Those are kind of the five big areas that are out there. It is the same across an attacker, IT/OT environments, or even if it's an AI tool. The technology changes, but the tactics don't, I guess, is the end goal
Right.
towards this. So, do we
Right.
still need firewalls out there? We still need firewalls that are out there. You still need the policers to go ahead and give you the ability to stop things. You still need visibility, right? Because end of the day, everything is being built off of some kind of identity, and someone's trying to get access so that they can do something inside these digital environments. So, I think that's an interesting conversation more than anything else philosophically. The basics still matter, and they're going to still matter. I think we could even go into the idea of, hey, AI, it's built by humans. That means it has human intentionality behind it. And because of that, it's going to follow the things that are built within the human
Right.
progress of what we're trying to gain. So a lot of interesting details around there, but I'll put it off from here. We do have a threat report we put out most yearly. It's a global landscape threat report. We documented, I think it was around 36,000 malicious scans per second hitting networks worldwide. And this is everything IT, OT that's included. I want to be clear on this, right? If there are 36,000 malicious scans going on hitting networks, what's trying to happen, whether it's a person or it's a program or some sort of AI agent? They're still looking to get in and find the basics, open ports, default credentials, unpatched systems. You name it, we're still doing the same thing. We still have to protect against the same issues.
Yeah. So it's back to blocking and tackling, right?
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, to think about that, on the cyber side, again, let me ask you this before I go down that path. Do you see any difference across industries? I mean, whether you're talking about banking or
Yeah.
education or healthcare or utilities, I mean, is it from your perspective, network, secure access and stuff, is it all the same or is it different?
Yeah, you know what? A firewall is a firewall. Ransomware is ransomware. It's just how exactly you said it's being used. Threats don't tend to care about the industry if we're going down that behavior route towards it. It really comes down to, does that organization, well, if you've heard of the CIA triad, do they care about confidentiality? Do they care about integrity? Do they care about availability? What is of those three things when we're talking about data and networks? What is the number one concern that they're trying to address? Usually in the cyber physical world and the utility space, it's a lot of times availability. That's the number one conversation there. If we
Right.
go out to the healthcare or like education side, many times it's confidentiality because you're dealing with a lot of people type first in their data, and someone's trying to get access to do something with it. So it's just intent. It's business intent and the resilience of the operations that really matter. So I'm not going to say there's not a difference. There is a difference, but from a tool technology perspective, pretty much doing very similar things. It's just what are we trying to address within the business need?
Yeah. And from, again, I've been around 100 years in the industry and, when I first started, the most of the security concerns were physical,
Yeah,
right? So we
yeah,
were trying to figure out, how do we keep, some the evildoers from getting into an office building or somebody pulling a truck up outside of a substation loaded with fertilizer,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so your exposure was, while it would be bad, it was, limited. But
yeah,
now, to your point, from a cyber perspective, the evildoers don't even have to be in the same country, right? They could be on the other side of the world, and they're pounding away looking for those weaknesses that you were describing there. So what are you seeing, from a cyber perspective that maybe, I don't know, I don't want to get too deep or expose anything we shouldn't expose, but what technologies, processes are you seeing, particularly in the utility side, from a cybersecurity perspective that would help, the utilities are like everybody else. They're
yeah,
trying to decide if they can use public services,
yep,
right? Whether it's
yep.
public communications networks or cloud computing, whatever. So when you wrap all that up, what are you seeing from Fortinet's perspective in the industry of what's working well and where are still some challenges you got to overcome?
Um, Interestingly enough, and I don't think this would be a surprise, Rusty. I think the big shift that's happening in the utility space that I see when I talk with public-private, providers is things are being more heavily driven by economic and operational realities. And that to me is following right alongside kind of some of the business side of the world too, right? Of the traditional IT. I think 10 years ago, we had a simpler conversation. Utilities need to run private networks, period. Right?
Hmm.
MPLS circuits, microwave circuits, backhaul, private fiber. You wanted to own everything, control everything. And that was where the business that's where I came up through, right? Was building
Right.
those types of networks, right? But that's expensive. The problem is, even though it was expensive, it was yours. But now we have this really financial impact coming down here. But really, if you say what I think has changed, I should say is when we have this explosion of like smart grid technologies, looking for distributed energy resources and being able to gain visibility, meters, grid edge analytics.
Right.
Now we have utilities that are doing more than managing networks, right? They're managing millions of connected endpoints, and and it just it's crazy. It's really doesn't span with what we've done in the past. So you can't just simply build private connectivity to every like smart meter out there, right?
Right.
We can put LTE and any type of like circuits that are out there, but we get into this problem of scale where the economics end up not working. So what that means is yes, we have the connectivity out there, but this is where you've mentioned cloud. It's starting to become very I think, attractive because the capabilities that you need for the big data analytics, because we're connecting all these devices that are sitting out there. So you're going to start to see utilities are finally making peace with what I would call like a hybrid architecture. There's going to be some private, some public, and then the real question coming back to the security side is how do you secure all that? How do you have um, pretty consistent security policies across the board? So it really does come back to folks are looking at this from a risk conversation and realizing that business need is outweighing the risk. But I think there are things you can still do, right? And this is where utilities are getting kind of more into that access control conversation we talked about earlier, and it's the basics, proper segmentation, right? You want to use zones, right? And there's the concept of zones, even in the IT space. If our utility partners in the SCADA side of the world, you have a similar type of concept that's there. Secure remote access. We typically want to see that when we have like a contractor going into, like an HMI or some sort of SCADA side of the network. You have the same thing in cloud world. It's just called zero trust network access.
Right.
It's very much similar controls that are out there, but you start to put those controls in place. And then we're looking at the same time encryption of data, where it's going towards. We want to make sure that we have encrypted connections to the cloud. But then the biggest one for all this, and you'll hear this time after time, and this is what matters, is you need to be able to see what is going on, threats, data. So you need some sort of unified visibility that you can look at all of your networks there because we're connecting, because we don't have these segmented networks anymore. You really have to look at how do I put segmentation out there and least privilege access to these types of devices. So if you would say, like, is that kind of like, I guess going back to your question of that is probably what I'm seeing more than anything else, a little bit more openness.
All right. So yeah, in the early days when we first started securing those networks, it was more about putting a fence around it, right?
Yeah,
And we used to call it the hard outer shell, trying to protect the chewy, delicious center, right? Because once you got through the shell, then you had free reign to run around in there wherever, and that's kind of things you're talking about helps
yeah.
mitigate some of that. So you were talking earlier about the artificial intelligence and what Fortinet's doing in that world in providing, these security or secure access kind of services. I mean, what's available out there in the marketplace? I mean, I'm not asking you to give me the Fortinet sales
Yeah,
pitch per
yeah.
se, but how can we leverage a technology that we may or may not understand completely or may have negative connotations for it, but how can we utilize that kind of technology to help us, improve our ability to protect the networks?
hmm So there are a lot of new things coming out all the time. A lot of new startup companies, when it comes to everything that's out there. But you said something. How do you leverage it? I think you want to think about AI or anything new. If we're looking at technology, I like to use this from a framework. But the big change I'm happen is where you want to use the tool to give you the best outcome of where you have either the lack or the need, right? So I think right now, if you were to like ask me for prediction, um, what what really makes a lot of sense to me is looking at three areas to put some sort of AI or controls around, if you will, and then be able to implement it. And that's anything that's going to give you better visibility, anything that's going to increase automation, and then this convergence conversation that's out there. So this is kind of an AI conversation, but really the new things coming out here because of AI being a driving force. We all know that visibility has to happen, and I think we also have to be very aware that we know we have blind spots. So
Right.
with blind spots, but then also with what you're seeing today, how do you actually start to work a system with multiple things coming at the same time? So I'll explain it a little bit better with like this story. Imagine you have a system. I'm talking like utility system. You finally get the chance where you have visibility where you know at least every device on your network. You at least know what's out there. It either has an IP address or a MAC address, something like that. You can kind of see what's out there. But do you know what it does? What it does? Do you know what firmware is running on it? Which is key in here because we'll talk about something like virtual
Mhm.
patching in the future. And also, are there vulnerabilities that are out there? If you have anybody, you're paying somebody to do this, or if you're doing any of this work in house, someone's constantly watching that. And we have to get back to the point of the matter of there are specific behaviors we expect those devices and things to do. But where threat actors happen is, or where people finally threat actors get noticed is on the behavior side. Why is there a DNP3, a protocol right now putting to upgrade some sort of process change at 3 in the morning when that doesn't happen?
Right.
What you don't have someone looking at that 3 in the morning. Most utilities don't have that. Yes, you're paying somebody possibly from a vendor perspective, but if you're doing anything in house, um, you want to know, I have to, what does this mean? How do you point that? How do you pick that one event out of the other 60,000 logs that is just everyday data that you're looking into because you want to get visibility? So this is what I mean. I think what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to see visibility at scale that's going to be powered by AI. So looking at those types of technologies are probably going to help you out. But again, it has to come back into that visibility. It has to have some sort of correlation into behaviors. And then what that should automatically then is go to automation, right? So if I have a place where I'm getting those 5,000 security alerts a day on the products I'm using here, how do I filter out the false positives, do the
Right.
triaging? How do I find the maybe 50 that matter? And if I were to do that today with humans, that's going to end up taking me probably hours to get that taken care of. You don't have
Right.
hours to deal with this, especially if we're talking about downtime. So utilizing some sort of tools that are AI powered for automation makes a lot of sense in that sort of the world, especially if we're talking about after hours. And lastly, I think this all sits under the umbrella of you have to continue or utilizing product services technology processes that get you to the point of converging your traditional networks and security together, right? So there are a lot of solutions that are out there on the IT side. They call something like that. They call SASE is usually
Mhm.
what happens there. That kind of touches the cloud. It touches your on-prem network. It touches private networks as well. But more than anything else, the whole idea here is you want the platforms out there to be able to talk. So the automation that you're trying to put in here can actually move across those platforms. You don't have to build custom scripts, custom agents. And lastly, with that visibility, you're able to see everything and get things down to minuscule seconds, right? As
Right.
compared to maybe the 2 hours to the 3 hours on average it takes a standard security operations person or even network operations person to do it. So I think more than anything else, if I were to put this, and I could have said this in 4 words, um, moving from reactive to predictive, right? That is what you want to focus on, right? Anything that can move you to more predictive utility, to more predictive analytics, more predictive actions, more predictive operations, that's going to be the thing you want to really focus on. And then what that does is that also talks about the concept of workforce. You're augmenting your workforce, you're giving them better tools to do more, you're not replacing people. That's the general vision behind this. And I think that's probably where you're going to see the biggest bang of your buck for anything new technology wise because everything's so AI driven right now.
Yeah. And the way I've looked at it and tried to explain it to people, the use of the AI technology within the utility industry, as well as others, automate manual processes,
Yeah,
automate reactive response, right?
yeah,
To when
yeah,
bad things happen, what do I do, figure it out and have a plan. But the other is the predictive or proactive
yeah,
piece that you were just describing to try to keep those bad things from happening. And then, you can deal with them in a more planned manner as opposed to reactive. All right, we're getting close to the end of our time here, Mike. So let me ask you one more question. Don't violate any IP rules here, but what's the next big thing do you think in this secure network access space? We talk about AI, we talk about quantum computing and other things that are flying around in the
yeah.
technology world. Is there something similar on the network security side?
Greater integrations across the board, right? For the many times, all of us vendors out here that create these products and services, we've been very focused on, hey, this is the network, this is the pipe, this is what happens there. I think what you're going to end up finding more is just more integrations around AI operations, right, on the network side. A lot more self-healing networks, if you will.
Hmm.
But then also really moving that availability time frame up because you what we call AI operations or AI ops. It's doing the remedial predictive work. So we kind of talked about it, moved from reactive predictive. Expect everything you want the network to be better, and there to be machine tools out there that are going to help you get that taken care of, and you don't have to necessarily say you don't have to touch it, but you tune it, you watch it, and then pop up the uh, it will pop up the issues before they happen so you don't have downtime. Totally expect that to happen.
Yeah. So I think this whole idea of network security is a journey,
Yes.
right? We never get there, right? We take a step and the bad guys take a step and
Mhm.
we're trying to continually address the risks that are out there. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Are we better today than we were yesterday? But we still got challenges to go. Well, Mike, thanks for being with me today. You took some time and talked to me about this space. I want to thank Fortinet for getting involved with UTC, and I hope that relationship continues down the road for many years. But thanks for being with me today.
Rusty, thanks so much. Pleasure's been all mine. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. You guys have been an incredible partner for us, and frankly, I think the work that you're continuing to do from just to bring the utilities together, share knowledge, raise this bar of cybersecurity, it's more important than ever. So we know threats aren't slowing down,
Yeah,
but also neither is the innovation side of it. So I'm actually genuinely optimistic about where the industry is headed, and more than anything else, I'm happy that we get partnered with UTC to do so. So thanks for having me.
absolutely. Thank you. Well, that will do it for this edition of the C-Suite Conversation. I hope you'll subscribe to our podcast. Be on the lookout for future episodes, and I look forward to seeing you all down the road.